Hey, welcome to another episode of Pathway to Purpose. I am super excited that I have a longtime friend, colleague. We've done business together, we've done life together, we've had fun together. She is a fellow nurse. She recently wrote a book, which I am super excited about, and we could use language on this, and that's fine. For the media gods is the shit they don't tell you in nursing school. And if you haven't got it, definitely get a copy of it. And I've been blessed to be part of when she launched it, and we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways. And just prior to this podcast, we had some awesome topics I wish that we were talking about that I wish we had recorded. So I said, let's just do this. So we have Jessica Smith dos Santos. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, Todd. I think you forgot to say that we've probably also cried together. I'm pretty sure that has happened.
We've
It's,
cried, we've
it's so,
laughed,
yeah, yeah. It's so good.
we
It's such a blessing to be here. I was stoked when you asked me.
we wore leather pants together.
We did. I almost forgot about that.
That is great. So Jess, for people that don't know, give us a little background on your story, and how you landed here for sure.
Yeah. So I said when I graduated from nursing school as the salutatorian, I literally said, I didn't choose nursing, nursing chose me. And it has been in my blood since I can remember. I wanted to be a nurse. And I describe nursing as the profession that I fell in love with, but that kicked me in the teeth, burned me out, and tossed me to the curb before I sort of figured out what is nursing really about. And I've been a nurse for almost 20 years. Next year it will be 20 years. And I say, except for the 5 years that I left, because I burned out and I left the profession for 5 years. And it was during that time when I got a lot of coaching. I developed myself personally. I had my own coaching business. I wrote a book, and it just really made me understand that it wasn't nursing that burned me out. It was the fact that I wasn't given the skills that I needed to be able to do the hard things without being traumatized. And once I realized that, it just lit a fire inside of me for doing the hard things in nursing differently, giving people the skills that I now have that allow me. I've been back in the emergency room for, gosh, almost 6 months now, and I'm doing okay. I'm not rocking in a corner or looking at the bottom of a bottle or any of those things that I used to do. And I've actually reconnected with the joy, the things that brought me to nursing to begin with. And so I was kind of giggling because on the back of my book, I make a comment that this book is my comeback story. And now that I'm back in nursing, I was like, you can't actually have a comeback without coming back. So I was like, this book is pre-comeback, and book two is literally writing itself as we speak, which is so cool.
That is awesome. And I think I've been nursing, oof, 96.
Oh my gosh.
Do the math.
I can't even. It's
I
so
can't.
much. I can't do it.
and, and it's funny as you were sharing, it's like I feel like we're kindred spirits because I'm actually back on the front lines myself through a coaching business going corporate. Like I was like you, I think, and and I'm going to ask you this question. Like when I got into nursing, like I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was in the military and I liked medical. So I did medic. And then I was like, okay, so what am I going to get a degree in? And I didn't want to go to med school because I just felt it was too involved. And back in the day, like I was raised in the Stallone time, Sylvester Stallone, right? And you ask kids today, they're like, who's still Stallone? Who's Arnold Schwarzenegger? And
Oh man.
I'm like, I failed you. I failed you. I totally failed you. But there was this movie called Cliffhanger, and they
Oh,
were
I
doing
love cliffhanger.
rescue stuff out in the mountains, and I'm like, that is me. That is me, and this is the journey I'm going on. And I said, I'm going to be a helicopter flight nurse and all that. And then I get into nursing, which all of a sudden I, go to the ICU and I get do corporate and then all so many different things outside. And I'm finally circled back to the bedside like you. So when you were sharing that story, um, I love that because you're back making, when you said making a comeback, I was thinking of LL Cool J.
I think we're dating ourselves, Todd. We
I
haven't failed the
know.
younger generation. We're just old.
He had that song. Don't call it a comeback. So I know. So it's great that we could be fun here. But so what was the inspiration around you doing this book? Like, you know, you were like, man, this is something I got to do. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was honestly a 4-year journey. Like the book took 4 years from the second I started writing to the time it actually came to the market. And honestly, it started as a space for me to vomit all the things that were like eating at my heart, eating at my mind, the things that kept me awake at night, the things that frustrated me. And by the time I was finally done expressing myself in writing, I had 100 pages of just like verbal vomit, like my own way of just pulling out the things that hurt because I didn't know what to do with them. And um, as I was reading through it, I was like, number one, I know for a fact that I'm not alone in this. And I think that a lot of nurses maybe don't have that awareness because we have such unique experiences in the different subspecialties of nursing that maybe we feel like any other nurse wouldn't understand what I've just been through or the depth of the emotion that I've been through. And as I was reading it, I was like, I just heard another nurse friend complain about this the other day, and I heard someone else complain about this. Like it made me realize that I wasn't alone. And then I thought, I'm not the only one. And my pain and my story has such like profound ability to make an impact for another nurse. But the way it was written, I was like, this is not in service of anybody. Like it's just my own hate and anger spewed out on a Google Doc. So I ended up just sort of taking like the highlights, like the really hard stories, the traumas, the emotions, like the themes of it, and I deleted most of it. Like I didn't even save it as a rough draft and start over. I just highlighted and hit delete on a lot of it. And then I started over with the bare bones of like the hard stories, the emotions, and then the skills that I had learned and was in the process of practicing and reflecting on how if I had had those skills at the time the traumas happened, would it have been different? And the answer is absolutely without a doubt, yes. Because you and I were talking before this, like when we didn't hit record, that I had a really difficult case in the ER that I never thought that I would be put in that scenario ever again. And I was right back in the exact same scenario. And this time I did it very differently from a different perspective with different skills, not only for patient care, but different skills for my own mental health. And it's a completely different story. And I really loved seeing that like this is truly my comeback. Like this part two, like this me being back in the ER that like burned me out so bad. This is truly my comeback story, like playing itself out in real time. And now I'm living proof that the skills that I write about in my book are actually applicable. Like I have used them in real time in the ER, and I feel free. Like I'm free to be in love with the things that brought me to nursing in the first place, rather than resentful of the things I didn't expect because I didn't have the skills to navigate.
Thanks for sharing that. So you said something and I'm curious about, and because something came up for me around it. Like you wrote all this stuff, all these things, and you hit delete. That it came out of just spewing stuff out and pain and hate and all that stuff. And what comes to my mind, and I love what you said that you hit delete, is like, have you, it's like we're on social media and somebody makes a post and you're like totally ripped about it and you go to like type something, right? And I don't know if you've ever done this before, but you're like, because you're so fired up about the topic. And especially now we're in a political season, people are posting all this stuff's driving you
Yes.
nuts. And you want to just like, and I found myself typing it out and I said, boom, I deleted it. I'm like, this is not centered quality. Is that the same energy that you kind of felt when you put all that out, that you on the delete side of that, that it came from this place?
Yeah, it came from a very unbalanced, irrational thinking, very one-sided perception. Because you and I both know that you and I could be shoulder to shoulder and witness the same facts and have completely different experiences, right?
Yep.
And so what I realized was that my experiences of those facts were, um, gosh, almost immature, if you will, and immature in the ways that, like, I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the perspectives, I didn't have somebody to maybe shine a light on a different angle, right? Like it was very tunnel visioned and it was very victim mindset. And I'm not saying that experiencing those things is wrong, but what I am saying is that being able to get them out and then have the awareness of like, oh, this is very immature, it's very victim minded, it's really truly not an accurate balanced representation of what that experience was. And it was in service of me to be able to get it out because that was my first step. Like I had to be able to, um, call the devil by name, so to speak. And once I did that, then I was able to see the other perspectives. And I realized that in the beginning, it was helpful for me to get it out, but it was not in service of anybody else. Because if I had put that out into the world, all it would have done is validate other people's victim. And that doesn't serve anybody. And as a matter of fact, it really steals your power because if you're a victim and something else or someone else or another circumstance is in charge, then you have no power to change it. And
Mhm.
I don't believe in that.
I love that. I love that. I work extensively with people on this victim mindset and looking at our thoughts. I think understanding, I love what you shared about this, is that you're able to see it for what it is.
Mhm.
And I think one of the challenges, and we get triggered. Like I think, this stuff comes up, but the trigger is there, but being able to recognize and see it for what it is is powerful in itself. And I think oftentimes people don't see it. And I think I love what you shared. And what I started to think about was that you didn't have kind of the support and the resources and things at that time. And it made me think about what nursing, we're so patient focused, right? Like, oh, my patient's what matter, right? And it's true. But if we could have that same level of energy to the people we work with and support them, what's your thought on that?
My mind instantly went to if we could have that same level of energy for ourselves,
Ourself. Yeah.
right? Because I poured myself empty for my patients, for my friends, for my family, for my coworkers. And
Mm,
I had no idea, truly disconnected from how much I was actually hurting.
mm. Wow.
And so for me personally, I had to start with like this awareness, right? Like at first, I was like, you're such a freaking loser. Like, how do you have all these gifts and you don't take care of yourself? And then I was like, hold on. I have all of these gifts. What if I leverage them to care for myself at the same level that I care for everybody else? Like I didn't understand my gifts in that context. But the encouraging thing was I knew I already had the gifts. So I just had to learn how to apply them in a new context in new ways. And now I'm pouring from a place where my cup is overflowing. And like the people around me get what overflows rather than me trying to split up the very last drop. Like just yesterday at work, I had 5 pediatric patients, and there was plenty of tasks to keep me busy for hours. And we didn't have a tech to support. And I told the doctor, I was like, hey, I'm super hungry. I'll be back in about 10 minutes. I'll be right over there in that break room. And I walked away. I heated up my lunch. I sat down. I tasted my food, and it took 10 minutes. And I went back to work, and nobody even knew I was missing. Whereas before, it'd have been like, I can't do it. I have too much. They're going to miss me, like this whole like rushed energy. But I would actually argue that everything got done faster and more efficiently because I was willing to pause the hustle.
Pause. I love that. I love that. So, you know, one of the things that I see a lot of nurses doing that are, out in the business world trying to help support each other, and I love all the different things, is, they're often like about self-care. And I'm a huge fan of self-care. I am. And I also think that self-care needs to be looked at in a different way as well. Like we often say, hey, take care of ourselves, take time for ourselves, massage, yoga, work out, meditate. And oftentimes the nurse is just so stressed and overwhelmed um, at work that oftentimes it spills home, or the vice versa, home spills out, home and our personal lives spill out into work. So, what are your thoughts on getting your cup filled? Because I feel, and I'm going to say it spiritually, that filled, that helps me be a better nurse, a better person, and things like that. So it's those things I mentioned, and some of the internal nuances and connecting to spirit, whoever, whatever one person reflects to. Mine is God for sure. What's your thought on, filling that cup to be more effective?
So your initial like lead up to that question was I see a lot of nurses out doing businesses focused around self-care.
Right.
And I want to start there because what was true for me is when I started my own coaching business, I was focused on helping nurses bounce back from burnout because that's what I was trying to bounce back from. And with 10 years of business wisdom under my belt at this point, I see a lot of nurses out hustling, trying to heal themselves under the cover of a business
Mm,
rather than creating a business from a space of truly being healed. And that was completely true for me. I was trying to coach out of my own trauma without like really being healed. So some of my clients ended up being more triggering because I wasn't on the other side of it yet. So I'll just put that like loving word of caution
mm,
out for nurses. Like if you're trying to create a business because you're trying to hustle through your own trauma, it's hard. It's hard. I'm not saying it's not worthy because my path took me 10 years and I have so much wisdom on the other side of that. So by all means, like keep following your path. But when it comes to truly creating a business that's impactful for others, on this side of it, I don't believe that you can lead people where you haven't first gone. And that's why coaching nurses in burnout was so hard and so heavy because I hadn't quite figured it out for myself yet. And I was coaching from my own trauma in attempt to heal my own self, which I didn't know that at that time. Um, on this side of it, when it comes to filling your own cup, I believe that that's a conversation about highest values. I'm a huge fan of Dr. DeMartini's his values exercise that allows people to truly discover their own unique highest values and giftings. And for me, it's about doing a whole lot more of those highest value things.
Mm.
Like, I love reading, I love coaching, I love nature. Like, if I can get out in nature and have my toes in the sand on the beach and read a good book, that fills my cup so fast. Like, an hour of that, and I'm good for like a week, versus like getting a massage or going to a nail salon. Like, those, I call those like surface self-care things, right? Like, when somebody says self-care, you immediately think of like, oh, I'm gonna go take a nap, or I'm gonna go get a manicure, have a spa day. Like, that's what marketing wants you to believe self-care is.
Mm.
However, self-care is truly doing more of what's already in your own highest values. And it takes time to discover what those truly are. Like, for as example, for me, when I did my values exercises, um, some things were very obvious. And then like marriage was mentioned 0 times. And it was like really easy for me to be like, I'm a terrible wife, like, and right, judge myself. It doesn't mean that marriage isn't important to me. What it means is that it's something that I have to be really intentional about. And if I don't get into nature and don't read a book and don't like do my highest values, I don't have anything left to be intentional on that marriage about. It just means it takes work. It doesn't come as naturally to me. And so I would really say, like, start with figuring out how you're truly wired and what you really value without all the bullshit of what society tells you should value, and start doing more of that, because that fills my cup faster than anything. Like, game night with my kids. It's so full.
I love it. I love it. And I love that you shared that unique part that people recognize or take a look at in themselves and what they need. I'm similar. I love coaching people, and I do that when I'm not doing some bedside stuff. And I'll tell you, after I'm done, watching people grow and shift, like, man, it's not work, it's filling my
Hmm.
cup. And I love what you said about healing this pain through creating a job, because I did connect with somebody. I do talk to a bunch of nurses who are like, um trying to create something on their own with not necessarily the skill set to do that, but also coming from an energy of like, I can't go back to doing that, so I need to do this. And in my mind, I call it's kind of like an escapism. Even that's just a term I use. It doesn't mean anything other than it's not like I was, and I did this a long time ago. So I was speaking, man, person of experience. Like, I was just so burned out and fried that like I had to get away. And you're right. It comes from a place of, I haven't healed it yet, and so the energy brought into that isn't the best. So your book, right? So share with me. You were talking about the skills, and I think, what intrigued me about it was the skill sets that you acquired to be able to make those shifts. From your perspective, and you talked about some here already, what do you think was kind of some of the profound things that you've learned that has enabled you to shift to a different perspective in your
Hmm.
career?
So there are a couple of things. Number one, through coaching and through story work, I've learned how to be able to look at a specific experience through multiple lenses. And so, one of the things that I did with my writing coach when I was writing my book is I would write the story through like the tunnel of my lens. And then she would say, okay, now I want you to write the story from the perspective of your patient. Now I want you to write the story from the perspective of the ER physician that you worked with. Now I want you to write the story from the perspective of the family member at the bedside. And like, it really like basically ripped me out of my tunnel and gave me so much more compassion for the whole story
Mm.
rather than my little piece of the pie. Like that work brought wholeness to a fractured story. And that was really, really cool. So just being aware of like, I call it being wrapped around the axle. Like I grew up with like truckers and mechanics. And so like when I feel myself getting wrapped around the axle about something, right? Like all frustrated and tightened up and all the things, I'm like, okay, interesting. Isn't this interesting? I wonder what like broken part of the story I'm attached to and the rest of it, the whole piece that I'm not seeing. And it helps me do like as basic as it sounds, like feeling your feelings. And I literally did not know how to feel my feelings in my body as a sensation and allow them to move through me and be expressed. I was like the master of like, I'm super fucking pissed right now, and I'm just gonna walk around like a she tornado and just destroy everything in my path, and nobody knows why. Right. And like the perfect example is um anger, right? Anger is the perfect example because anger is felt in your jaw, in your upper shoulders, and it's a sign that like something is no longer in service, something needs to be let go, a boundary has been broken. And I took care of a psychiatric patient a while back that was super manipulative. He ended up pushing me out of his way, grabbing his belongings and hightailing it for the parking lot. And like he was halfway across the parking lot before anybody could even catch him. And I was at a doorway that was like between him and the parking lot. And eventually I had the wisdom to just step out of the way and let him go where I was going to get hurt. But afterwards, like my whole body was just coursing like with adrenaline. And I was so mad. I was so mad. And at the same time, I had four other patients. One of them was a 3-year-old who was not breathing well, who was on breathing treatments. She had retraction. She was breathing at her belly. She needed a magnesium drip. Like she was sick. And because of the work I've done, I just called my educator and I was like, hey, I need you to come take over this patient load for, I need 20 minutes. And she put me in her office. She locked the door. She gave me a box of tissue and I cried. I sighed. I shook my fingers, like whatever it was that my body needed to do to move that energy. And I was fine. Like I just was able to move that energy. I paused. I practiced what it was that I had learned. I moved the energy of that emotion. I was able to go back to work the rest of the day. I got home, like I barely even thought another thought about the man. And he ended up coming back, by the way, because I had given him Ativan and Benadryl, like the injections, like right before he did that. So by the time he came back, like 45 minutes later, with the same ambulance crew that had brought him the first time, he's on the gurney, like, and I was able to just like check him back in, put the blood pressure cuff on. Like I didn't have any sort of feeling. And if I hadn't have done that, I would have been like out of my mind, furious that he would come back to the same room. I would not have been able to think rationally about caring for my other patients. I probably would have um, given my other patients probably would have been afraid of me, honestly, because I would just like hold on to that energy rather than allowing it to be what it is. And I feel like that if I could only choose one thing to give to my fellow nurses, it would be that one skill. Because that is the thing that took me down, not being able to process my emotions, numbing them with food and shopping and promiscuity and alcohol and sugar. Like it's all the things that we do because we don't know what to do. And now that I know what to do, my life is very different.
I love that you shared that because I think this gives us a unique opportunity, and I'm going to kind of go a different way in this for us to really be the observer of ourselves. And this is, from what you shared earlier about not being a victim, and being able to look at things from a different lens, because how often in the past, and I'm guilty of it too, is we don't take that time to process it. And what does that sideways behavior look like?
Well, I
Um,
would say we don't take the time because we don't know how.
we don't.
It's like I would love to take the time, but like, WTF do I actually do? Right? I go get my nails done.
Well, the awareness is, and I share this story about myself. I was in the military and I was in boot camp, and they break you down to a level of like breakdown. And you're under extreme stress, and you start to see how things come out of you. And I noticed that I had zero tolerance for people that could not like get it together and let's move forward. And it's my issue. Like, it was my issue. And I noticed that I would get angry and short with people. And me now, like, I look at that incident, and this is what I love about your stories. You look at these things where you would have been the tornado, right? But those are the biggest teachers, because this is the trigger point.
Yep.
And I'm not saying I'm always perfect by any stretch, but I have this level of awareness that when my stress level gets high, I get into get it done, move forward. And if you're, in my mind, these are terms we use in the military. If you're a slug, man, because they used to say, you're a slug, private, you're a slug, right? But I had zero tolerance. And then the sideways behavior that came out around that, and I'm going in a direction on this, is that was a teacher. But then I've learned to be the observer of it now, so it doesn't go sideways. So now, with that being said, we often see, I still read all over LinkedIn and all over the place. There's a lot of nurse bullying. There's a lot of, people doing all this stuff and be these behaviors. And I often say, like, to me, by the grace of God, there go I. But because it gives me the ability
Mm.
to have compassion in my heart about it. But what's your take on unprocessed this and how this has affected nurses?
Well, I giggled about the nurse bullying because there's literally like this little pile of books in the break room where I work. It's like about nurse bullying. It's like, stop the bullying. And I immediately am like, this is such bullshit. Like, number one, there's no such thing as bullying. Like, I don't even believe in that. There's just like, it's behavior,
It is.
right? And it's to your point, like it's programming that we don't even know is there. It's triggers. It's us not being able to observe, like, oh, this is a trigger and this is the sideways behavior, right? And in my opinion, the whole thing of nurse bullying like paints other nurses as victims, and I'm not about that. Like, I am not a victim of anybody else's behavior ever. And if somebody is air quote exhibiting bullying behavior, number one, it's not about me. But number two, how is it actually for me? Like,
Mm,
what are they saying or doing that might call me to grow in a certain way?
I love that.
So that's just my take on bullying altogether. But like, even to your point about like this behavior and how we treat each other as nurses, is it all goes down this route of like, you were literally programmed to believe and behave a certain way, but between the time you were born and the age of 7, like there is a set of patterns. Like, one of my patterns is being super overcritical, and I'm a little OCD. Like, I like things a certain way, right? And that can both serve and harm me if unchecked. But that overcritical conversation came from my grandfather, came from my mother, came from when I was 1 to 7. And that operating system is within me, but I'm aware of it and actively working to reprogram those thoughts to like, oh, okay, I see I'm being really overcritical of my daughter or of my husband. Like, I'm just going to be real. It manifests the most in my own home. Like,
Mm.
I'm super overcritical of my husband in my own mind. And learning to call, just being the observer, like, oh, isn't that interesting? There's that thought again, right? And the vision for what I want for my marriage and the kind of wife I want to show up as, like, what do I need to shift that thought into to support the future I desire? Because I'm not willing to let my, you know, my programming, so to speak, run the rest of my future. Because if it did, I'd be a spinster. I'd have no friends, no family, no husband, nothing.
I know. Oh my God. And you just said so many great things because I agree with you, on that with the bullying concept. I do believe there's a message in the mess. And I also believe too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, like it goes back to the person doing it is there's a message there. And it's being open and aware of it and learning to process because I remember so many like you know I was working with a leader coaching a leader that was a nurse and they mentioned there was somebody on their team that was just so difficult and the shift was like we come from our what you said from our place of what we think and our reality isn't necessarily the reality. And of course this behavior may be coming out, but I said I wonder what kind of pain that person's experiencing that's
Well,
causing that and
on
what.
that note, Todd, like, I don't believe that anybody wants to be a bully. Like, I literally, in my heart, do not believe that anybody wants to make other people feel like crap all the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. The other thing too is, and I don't know if you've experienced it, we've chatted about it, right? Is how leadership or other nurses or other people start the gossip game and they start talking about other people, right? And here we go. For the grace of God, there go I. But being able to observe that in yourself is like, hey, what's that about? Like, why am I feeling? Is this giving me some sense of relief? What's your take? Because we see that a lot, and it happens everywhere. It's not just in nursing, but by any
Mhm.
stretch. But have you noticed that? And I'm curious about what your experience is with that.
Well, I've noticed it, but I will also say I'm guilty of it,
Hmm.
right? Like, I'm not exempt from gossiping.
Right.
And what I truly believe the root of gossiping is undeveloped communication skills.
Hmm.
It's the it's like the pressure valve for the release of a crucial conversation that has not happened.
Yeah.
And I think people these days are, with political correctness and victimhood and bullying, like all these things we've got going on, I think it's made people afraid to, number one, afraid to actually have crucial conversations at which someone else might disagree with you. But we've also completely devolved in our ability, like our skills, like having a crucial conversation where you're two conscious people who come to the table respecting one another is a skill,
Yeah.
right? It's a skill, and it's a skill that leaders, I'm sorry to say, for the most part, are not taught. They don't know about. If they do know about them, they're not practicing them. And that leads to gossip. Gossip is just simply a byproduct of a crucial conversation that hasn't happened.
100%. I
That's
agree.
when I gossip the most. Like if I'm talking shit about my husband, it's because I haven't actually talked to my husband.
And there may be some fear. There may be something going on, and it's the valve. I totally get that. And you're right. I spent an engagement with somebody teaching them this proprietary communication style that really gets to the part of people starting to have these conversations that flow out of integrity
Mhm.
and get people to and enable each person to kind of let down those walls because we have those walls. So it's interesting. So let me ask you a question, and it's kind of a loaded question. If you had to share some of the shit they didn't tell you in nursing school, and somebody said about to go into nursing school, like, hey, what's the shit they didn't tell you in nursing school? And I know you could talk about it all day, but give me the down and dirty.
So it's so funny because I do mentor some of the new graduate nurses that are in our department. And eventually, like the book comes up just in conversation. And one of the nurses, she literally laughed out loud when I told her the title. And she said, they don't teach you nothing. They teach you how to pass a test. And I was like, oh snap. Like I was like, tell me more. Like, what do you mean about they don't teach you nothing except how to pass a test? She's like, they don't teach you how to talk to your patients in a way that's like natural or conversational. They don't teach you how to talk to your fellow nurses or the doctors. Like, they don't teach you like basic communication things are what she felt like she was lacking. Like
Mm,
she didn't know how to have basic communication with her patients, with her coworkers, with the physicians, with her collaboration team. And like I am so furiously, ridiculously passionate about it that there is a curriculum brewing in my brain that like needs to be in every single nursing school,
mm,
right? And it's crucial conversations and it's how to feel your feels. Like if I had to describe it in one sentence, that's what it is. Of course, there's a lot of nuances within that, but like those are the two major things that I believe that they don't teach you in nursing school that will make or break your career. And unfortunately, new nurses get into the profession and they're learning from other nurses who are operating out of their trauma, who are bullying each other, right?
yep.
And then that becomes a learned behavior that we're passing on through the profession. And I am here to say I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know that I'm called to be a part of stopping that behavior and creating a next generation of nurses that are whole, that are conscious, that are awake, that have skills, that are comfortable having crucial conversations with their patients, with their coworkers, with the physicians that they work with. Like a very simple example is when I got back into nursing, I decided that I wanted to specialize more in pediatrics. And that is way outside of my skill set comfort zone. I worked with adults mostly my entire career, except for in trauma. Like we would do pediatric traumas. But outside of that, I am not a pediatric nurse. And I decided I wanted to be. And when I first started, I am not going to lie, I was shitting my pants a lot. Like there were a lot of things that were really uncomfortable for me. Like I felt like a new grad nurse. And some of the physicians were a little bit frustrated because I wasn't getting things done or I didn't quite know like the technique of how to do it. And I was asking a lot of questions. And finally, I just recognized that their frustration is because they have a different expectation of me. And I just said, look, this is my career path. I've been out of the game for 5 years. I worked with primarily adults. I really want to grow as a pediatric nurse. And there are things that I don't know that you do. And it would help me work better for you and for the community that we serve if you teach me, if you answer my questions. And like ever since then, the physicians have been amazing. And I remember one time specifically, I asked a question and the physician was a little bit snarky with me and like didn't quite give me the answer. And I was like, look, you can be snarky and not give me the answer because your expectation of me is different. Or you can help a girl out so I can work better for you and just let me know what to do. And he was like, oh, and he gave me the answer. And it's been fantastic. Like the other nurses are like, oh, watch out for that doctor. And I was like, I've not had one single problem because we got those unmet expectations out in the open, and we created a platform in which we had mutual understanding of each other with the belief that we both want to do what's best for our patient. And like, it's the physicians, I have learned so much from our physicians because they have been willing to teach me, because I was willing to say, like, it is what it is. Do you want to help me? And I think we need a whole lot more of that in the profession, because you and I both know there's shit that nursing school can't prepare you for, even if they wanted to,
Right.
right? That's the nature of the delicate condition that is human.
Yeah, it's so funny. I have this old school mentality about nursing school, and I
I
always
think
think about I always think about it, and it's because maybe it's because I'm a guy, because I was in the military or whatever, but people would say to me, like, "Nursing school's hard," and it is. I thought nursing school was hard. There was a lot of work, a lot of stuff coming at you, a lot of things you had to pull in, and it caused an immense amount of stress, right? And I have some friends that are in academia and nursing, and you know, I view it as boot camp, right? In the
mhm,
sense that they stress you so you could handle the tough road ahead, to see if you could handle that tough road ahead. And this is just my philosophy, and this is more of a existential 100,000, 300,000 view of it, not necessarily the nuances of what they taught me,
mhm,
but more of being able to get through it, being able to do it and pass and be pushed in different directions and be able to handle it because the job itself warranted those skill sets to make it. That's the anytime I share that about kinda my overarching philosophy, and if people really struggle with that, then maybe that field's not for them.
mm. I both agree and disagree. I
Mhm.
do agree that nursing school has to be a specific level of hard
Yep.
to prepare you, especially these new nurses who have this fantastical idea of, like, I want to be a badass ER nurse, or I want to be a badass ICU nurse, like, someday. But they don't have any concept of what that means, other than like this fantasized view of how awesome ER and ICU nurses are, right? There's a certain level of like skill that is required to be able to care for critically ill patients, for sure.
For sure.
The part that I where I kind of disagree is that they put you under that stress, right? And they definitely do. But what they don't do is give you skills to start growing strategy, like healthy strategies. Like, nursing school taught me how to drink alcohol. Nursing school did not teach me how to be okay with the hard things. Like, it taught me how to develop ineffective, socially acceptable coping skills, right? It didn't actually prepare me to truly be an overcomer. I would actually say it set me up to burn out. And thank God I bounced back. But I share a story in my book of a nurse that I mentored for 16 weeks as a brand new graduate in the ER, and she ended up committing suicide. And I can't say that it's primarily because of her nursing journey. I'm sure there were other things going on, but I can say that it was likely a factor. And as an overarching, thought, like, I wonder if she had different skills, would her story be different? Right? Without knowing the full picture, that's always a question, like, I wonder, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely. Part of me thinks as you were sharing that, the skills, is that a nuance of the qualities that the educators should teach as part of their teaching? A skill set of like, hey, this is hard. I'm going to give you skills. Because I don't know about you, but if you gave me a textbook, another textbook on how these are the skills that you need to read to,
Right.
that doesn't assimilate
Mm-mm.
rather than having some some of the educators skillful in helping people when they're going through that stress of nursing school learn some skill sets. I'm curious about that. It's just something that popped in my mind as you were sharing that. It's not
Mhm.
anything I came out of, you know. Um,
I think it's currently the way the system is set up. It is not an expectation, right? Like it's not something that's in an educator's wheelhouse, so
mhm,
to speak, in the current model. Do I think it should be? Do I think there's opportunity? Honestly, I'd have to really think about that. Like possibly, probably, because looking at my friend's an educator in our ER and looking at what she does, it's like heavy on skills, but she also has the heart and the wisdom to understand the emotional side. And she does a lot to support our staff from that angle. But again, to your question, like she just brings her own knowledge to the table. Like it's not something that she's been prepared for, right? And I think there's huge opportunity, whether it's through the role of the educator, whether it's through uh, like an employee assistance type program, whether it's through the new grad program in the hospital. Um, I think there's massive opportunity for more of that education, more of those skills.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. You know, because it's really interesting. And what was coming up as you were sharing that was now we have a new generation of nurses coming that have very different ideas in how things go and resilience factors and it just adds a whole nother element maybe for that next book as you start your journey as a chapter because you know my friends in the military have seen it too as like you know
Mm,
they've they can't sacrifice the quality they put out based on some of the skill sets that they're not coming and these are genuine just people skills that they need
mhm.
to learn through you know resilience and doing hard things and all that because that's that's a challenge. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. And it makes me think of something my 16-year-old son said, because we were talking about like the differences in the generations, right? Like Gen X and Gen Z and like the iPad generation, right? The iPad babies, they were calling them. And I was just talking about some of my frustrations, like with younger generations, and some of like the basic skill sets like integrity and accountability and being willing to just show up even though you don't feel like it. Open, honest conversation, like things that were a part of my raising that I see as normal, right?
Yeah.
Are not normal. And my son was like, well, honestly, mom, it's their parents' fault because your parents taught you those things and you showed up into the world as an adult with those basic skills because your parents taught you. Whereas this generation is not being taught. And it also reminded me of something. I can't remember who said it or where I heard it, but the comment was not only are we supporting our new graduate nurses and learning how to be nurses, but we're actually raising them.
Mm,
Like we're raising them up with those skills. And it was in the context of like a paycheck, right? Like the new grad is like, hey, why is my paycheck short? Versus like, oh, nobody ever taught you to go double check your time card.
mm,
Right. So it was in that foundational concept because I was asking, like, hey, how do I double check that this mentorship pay is actually getting paid? How do I double check that, my vacation time actually got applied? Like, I don't know how to use this new system. And it's just a comment of like, not only are we preparing our new nurses, but we're also raising them. And to my son's point, like, it's not their fault that they didn't get what they didn't get, but it is both our and their responsibility to step up, right?
I agree with your son. And I agree with what you said. And I had this conversation with somebody, and I was talking to their child who had these kind of strange set of expectations and how they interpreted things, and I was blown away, and I'm like, where's, and I was like, what? And so the immediate victim, I'm going to say it's a victim thought, is, oh, this is how these kids are. And I said, no. They said it's the parents' responsibility to teach them differently, because we're
Mhm.
allowing society, and we could go on a whole nother topic, but it is the truth. Like, if we take extreme ownership in this, it's like, hey, I think we developed ourselves out of hard times. Like, I was like a latchkey kid. Like, we had to like get after it or whatever. And I think it gave us some real sound skills. But I'm curious, as we're seeing this in the workforce, especially in healthcare, how that shows up. And I'm curious to see, have you been seeing how that's showing up, or we're not quite there yet?
Well, honestly, I think it's the perfect setup for the victim bullying thing, right? Because if we have leaders who are unconscious and don't have crucial conversation skills and emotional awareness, then there's this sweet little nurse with this like totally unrealistic set of expectations and lack of skill because of the way that they were raised, which, like, I'm not blaming anybody, but I think it's the perfect storm for that, like, nurse to nurse violence and bullying and all the things. And what's beautiful about it is that there are those of us that have that awareness that can see those patterns, and like, this is my call to action, like, get off your ass and do something about it. Right?
Mhm.
If you were gifted with a path that gives you that awareness and gives you those skills, show up in those situations differently. It was like I was chatting with a coworker who is really struggling with her health. And she's like, but I eat for stress. I'm like, I totally understand. I've done that. But the truth is, my friend, you have to choose your hard, because eating and feeling disgusting in your body and being exhausted and having your pants not fit and not feeling sexy in front of your spouse and hating the person you're seeing in the mirror is really freaking hard. And it's also really freaking hard to look those behaviors in the face and develop new ways and new disciplines to create a different result. It's equally hard, but you've clearly chosen your hard right now. And it's those loving conversations of showing up in that way. Like, I love you enough to say, like, both are hard and I love you, and choose your hard, friend. And she shared with me, she's like, oh, I left the house this morning and my breakfast was totally different. And my husband noticed. And he was like, oh, well, like, what's going on? And he's like, well, there's this nurse at work. And she was like, choose your hard. And it's really like, I'm really thinking about that. Right. And it's not like some big thing, like you and I are like, let's tackle the world, let's create a coaching business, let's do the things, right? It can be taking responsibility in just those small ways of how you're showing up for people. Like, be the example of how you do it differently. Like, don't get mad at them because they're not doing it the way you expect. Like, be the example.
That's it, totally be the example. I love that. I love it. So, man, we could go on
Oh my
forever,
gosh, forever.
forever, forever. So I am so glad you came on and shared some of this about your book. I will put your book in the show notes and your contact as well. Any final word for anybody nursing? Um, any final words on that? I'm gonna just leave it open on that. Like, what's coming in?
Mm. Well, the book is also an audio format. So if like the thought of picking up a book is cringy, go get the audiobook. You can hear my voice in your ear. But really, if I could wrap it up with one thing, is if you've heard our conversation, I'm willing to bet that you walked away with a new awareness. And now that you're more aware and you know better, you can go do better. So whether it's coaching with Todd, coaching with myself, reaching out to a counselor, like wherever it is that you are called to go connect with somebody that can help grow you now that you have a different awareness, do it. Because I am never done. I still have all my own crap that I'm working on reprogramming. Like I have things that are still not the way I want them to be. And I have a vision for what I want for myself, for my family, for my marriage, for my profession. And I have a coach. As a matter of fact, I have several contacts that I go to. I have friends, I have coaches, I have mentors, and I'm just constantly willing to be curious and to be wise with what I choose to work on. And now that you know better, you can do better. So, this is my call to action to you. Ask a question, be curious, be willing to do hard differently, and be willing to choose what hard that looks like.
I love it, Jess. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I echo that. I have a coach. That is the biggest investment. And what you said was so much gold. The one shift I tell all my clients is just start to be curious about what else. What could this,
Oh,
what else could this mean? What am I being taught here? I love it. It's the being open and curious in all directions. Jess, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your book, your insights, everything. And, we're all on this journey. None of us have arrived. It's always the journey.
it's real. It's
It is.
real.
It is real. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.